One of the best-selling niches in both the digital marketplace and print on demand are designs based on comic books. So in this video, I'm going to break down the types of products that you can sell, both physical products and digital products, and I'm going to go over where to find the images. So there's lots of tips and tricks and niche marketing ideas coming up. Let's go. Okay, before we get started, I want to point out that this is not a video about how to legally sell Spider-Man or Batman designs. You cannot legally sell trademarked images. Spider-Man is trademarked. Batman, Superman, they are trademarked. So me and you can't sell these types of designs legally because you don't have the rights to sell Marvel or DC or any licensed comic book characters, and neither do I. Now, if you've been on Etsy or Redbubble or any of the print-on-demand or digital sites, you'll see a ton of Marvel and DC comic book designs. These are all illegal unless they're part of a licensed fan art program. So Displate, for example, does have licensed Marvel and DC art designs because they're official shops. But for Redbubble and Etsy, the vast majority of these designs are completely illegal. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about other legal areas that you can sell comic book-based designs. I would strongly encourage you to not get greedy and sell Spider-Man designs. You'll run the risk of getting your account banned. Okay, so before we all hang our heads in shame and give up completely, hold on. I've sold hundreds and hundreds of comic book based designs, and they are all perfectly legal. So how did I do it? Okay, the first question you want to ask is, what does the market currently look like? So for example, if you're on Etsy, if you're selling digital SVG files on Etsy, we can see here on Etsy that if you search for comic book SVG, you get mostly clip art, like the BAM, boom, pow, whap, that kind of thing. You also get a bunch of illegal bootleg trademark infringing garbage like Warner Brothers, Daffy Duck, Superman, Spider-Man, etc. So one thing to remember is that crafters are typically looking for clean, simple images that they can use for a t-shirt or other products or other things they use, like say Cricut machine, for example, like a digital cutting machine. So you can get really specific, like one specific phrase or a specific saying or one picture, and you can sell it online for a couple of dollars. You don't necessarily need to have a 100 plus design bundle, but eventually if you get that many designs created, you could pursue that avenue as well. Bundles are usually great sellers because of the incredible value that customers get. So you do need to use your imagination, and you do need to come up with designs that currently don't exist, or there's very, very little competition, or they're designs that do exist, but you can make them better, unique, different, and appealing to customers. So where do you get high quality, legal comic book artwork? Let's take a look. Drum roll, please. The solution is public domain artwork. Now, if you've never heard of public domain before, it means that there's no copyright restrictions on it. And these are typically older pieces of artwork, 1940s pulp, 1950s comic books, and they're not Marvel or DC. So there's a website that I frequent all the time. It's called Comic Book Plus, and they have thousands and thousands of vintage public domain comic books that you can view and download. These are all completely free and legal to use. So I actually have some walkthroughs on Crafty Stax that do deep dives into certain genres of comic books. Those are really fun looks at public domain art. So here's just a few examples of different comic book covers and pages that you can use as a basis for your comic book designs. Now, I'm not going to edit any of these in the short little 10-second clip here, but these are gorgeous, and many older adults actually really like horror and romance comics instead of the usual superhero stuff. Let's jump into what digital designs you can actually make and sell. Let's do some brainstorming. So item number one that you can try is comic book clip art. So basically this method is that you find an old public domain comic book and then you cut out a panel or a specific image and then you digitally clean it up. And what I mean by that is you remove little imperfections from the original scan and then you create either a vector file or a high quality image file. So let's walk through an example of this. All right, so I just selected a comic book here at random. This one's called All for Love, Volume 3, Number 4. And I'm just picking this at random. Here's the cover. And when I click the actual page, it just goes to the next page. You get an old ad, and then this goes now to the main splash page. I'm going to take this image right here, this lady with her head in her hands. So I'm just going to right click and I'm just going to save this image. And then I'm going to open it up in some sort of photo editing software, Photoshop, Affinity Photo, and I'll just cut out this image. Okay, and I've got the image now to where I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So I could save this now as a PNG, and I could save this with no background, and that means that somebody can stick this on a t-shirt as is, or they can add in speech balloon, thought balloon. They could also add in a retro background. They can do whatever they like with it. Now you could run this through vector software as well, like in Inkscape, and you could make it even cleaner if you wanted to save it as an SVG. So this right now is a PNG that I've used in Photoshop. Method number two is really straightforward, especially if you have Photoshop, Affinity Photo, some sort of editing software. You remove the background of the image, and that's pretty much it. So you take an old comic book cover and you remove the background. This really looks good on a t-shirt or other physical product. So let's take a look at an example of this method. Okay, so I'm on Comic Book Plus and I've drilled down to find one science fiction comic book here that I like, and it's Captain Science #1. Notice the background is all yellow. This is a nice candidate to remove the background. It's not gradiated, it's not super complicated. So the problem is, if you were to put this on a t-shirt as is, say a black t-shirt, you'd have this yellow rectangle kind of glaring out on the t-shirt. And if you had a red t-shirt, it wouldn't look that great because the yellow and the red would contrast. So what I'm going to do here is just simply remove the background, and we can see a before and after on what a difference just removing a simple background makes. So what I typically do when I'm removing a background is I'll stick a really big loud layer on here, like a bright pink, and that shows me if I have any white that I've missed. It can be hard to see if you've just got a blank background, like there's a whole string of white over here that I missed. So when I turn on the pink background, it's like, whoa, look at that. So I can just go over here now and I can make sure that I delete this out. So I'm just going to use the magic eraser tool and I'm going to remove that. So you just want to make sure that you've got all of the background removed whenever you're working on something. I've got like a little bit of white bits around the Captain Science. If I was making a t-shirt, for example, I try to remove that and get that as clean as possible, but you get the idea. Method number 3 is to use editable templates. So in the real world, there are lots of comic book themed weddings and parties. However, there's a massive shortage of high quality editable design templates on marketplaces like Etsy. The key here being high quality, and the key here is that they are editable. So if you can come up with an editable high quality template, you can probably make some sales on Etsy. So the idea here is that you sell the Adobe Photoshop or Affinity Photo file as a template. The customer downloads it, and then you let the customer modify the design as needed. They can add their names in, the dates, that kind of thing. Here's an example of how that would work. So here's a great example of where we can do an editable template. I found a comic book here called All for Love, and we've got this guy at the movie theater smooching with the lady who works at the movie theater. Blondie here is not a big fan of this. And so what we can do now is we can remove the top of it and we can add in a wedding personalized piece, because the text is relatively separate, it's not overlapping, we can also cut out this black shadow and the green background and the lady, and we can have that all be editable so that somebody can purchase it as a Photoshop file or an Affinity photo file, and they can make it exactly how they want. So I'm using my version of Photoshop here. Again, you could use Affinity, Photo, whatever photo editing software you've got. I typically use an 11:17 template, 300 DPI, which is dots per inch. I have just a white background. And now I'm just going to separate out the layers to make it an editable file. So here's just a really, really basic example. I've got a bunch of layers, and I would actually sell this file. I would sell it as an Affinity photo file, or I would sell it as an Adobe Photoshop file. So depending on whatever program they're using. So in this case, I'm using a Photoshop. So I've got the original comic book cover. And then when I remove it, I've also got a background. So these people can the customer can play with this, right? There's a background that I've removed. So they can just have that if they want. There's the Comics Code Authority turns on and off. And then I've got all editable text that they can go in and they can change. So I think it's really nice that they've got options here that they can play with, right? Method number 4 is custom work. So this method's pretty straightforward, although it's not very passive. You create a template in Photoshop or Inkscape or Affinity Design or Affinity Photo. Now you do not sell that template. So you list your product on Etsy as a physical product. It could be a t-shirt, it could be something for a wedding, that kind of thing, but you do not sell the template. So the customer will then buy your physical product, you'll make a sale, and then they'll ask for someone's name or location to be put on the product. So let me show you an example of this. I think this is a great example of a customized opportunity. So here we've got a comic book. It's under the superhero genre, and I'm going to butcher this name. I think it's La Arana Verde, and it's number 2. Now we don't care about the text. I'm going to remove the text. I'm going to remove the background, but they've got these text boxes here. I'm going to remove that, and then we can just sell this as a customized birthday template. So take a look at the before, and then we're going to see what it looks like once I edit it. Okay, so here's my final template. Again, this is in Photoshop, and I've got a bunch of things here that are editable. I'm not going to sell this editable file, but what I would do is I would list this on Etsy, and I would list this as a custom request. So basically what you're buying is this picture on a product. It could be on a t-shirt or a sign, for example, and then I will customize whatever the text is that they want. So if the person says, I'm actually turning 55 instead, great, I can put that in. If the person's name instead of Steve is Jim, then I can put that in here instead as well. I can put in any text that I want, but I'm the one making the adjustments. Instead of happy birthday, I could have, tales of, instead of Spider-Man, it's, old man, that kind of thing, right? Now, if you're not the most creative person in the world and you're struggling to come up with ideas, just remember there's really 2 main options, and really only 2 main options when you're creating digital comic book designs. Option number 1 is to create the artwork without any irony or humor. You just take an old comic book cover, for example, you clean it up, and then you sell it as is, as a digital file, or as a print-on-demand file. So this method appeals to people who really like science fiction, horror, Western, or romance comics. The second method involves taking the comic book artwork and fundamentally changing the meaning of it. So for example, you could take a romance comic book cover and you could remove the logo or the speech balloons, and you can modify it with a funny phrase or something out of context. This looks really nice on a t-shirt. It's ironic, it's hip, and it's cool. I really hope you found this walkthrough helpful. Just remember, this entire channel called Crafty Stax is dedicated to crafting, digital designs, and teaching ways for you to level up and improve your digital design skills. Lots and lots of videos on this channel, so make sure to like this video and consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for watching, and here's another crafty video that you might find helpful.